Here's how to stop your PS5 from overheating. This video is sponsored by Scry. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. This is a little bit different kind of a video here for the channel because instead of going over the PS5 news, we've got kind of a little review and unboxing to go over here for a PS5 cooler. Now, I know what you're thinking. There are a ton of these coolers all over the internet. They're kind of like a dime a dozen these days. The big difference between the Scry Arctic and all the other ones out there is that this one actually sucks the hot air out of your PS5 instead of forcing cool air into it. So there's actually a noticeable difference in the thermals of the PlayStation 5. And I'm actually excited that they sent one over to show off here on the channel today because I've actually talked about it before. So around the middle of the summer this year, there were two instances in the news of PS5s overheating, and one I would argue is a lot more drastic than the other. We'll start out with the Final Fantasy 16 example. So you'll probably remember this earlier in the summer. Basically when people would get to a part around halfway through Final Fantasy 16, it would basically overload the PlayStation 5 and cause it to heat up to the point where the game would crash and the console would force restart, and then no matter what you did, you would basically have that same crash happen over and over again. There were a ton of ways people attempted to fix this issue by either A, putting their PS5 in a more ventilated area like taking it out of their TV stand, or B, popping the side plates off and cleaning out some dust, but there weren't really any surefire ways, and I'm pretty sure this can still happen to you to this day. Like months after release, getting to this part of the game can overheat your console and cause it to crash, which is obviously not a very good situation. Now, the other example of the PlayStation 5 overheating actually is a lot worse and has to do with the USB port. So if you didn't know, Sony bought the Evo fighting game tournament, which basically made it so that the PlayStation 5 is the de facto console that's used at this tournament. And a lot of people will bring their own fight sticks and they'll use them over USB connection because in a fighting game, you have to have super quick reaction time and you want to eliminate any latency possible. So a lot of people use USB connected fight sticks. So a lot of fighters in these tournaments will bring their own fighting sticks, the one they're used to, and they'll connect them over USB, again, to eliminate latency. And what was happening was, through the abuse of these consoles being used all day long for fighting game tournaments, so different games being played on them, being used for extended periods of time, obviously having a lot of people around will raise the heat up, and this took place in the summer. That all combined to the point where people, when they would pull out the USB cord from the actual PS5 console, they would rip out the USB port itself and it would get stuck in their fight stick, which is not a great scenario. And it was determined that it was because the console was getting so hot that it was melting that little blue plastic you see on USB 3.0 ports. And that's just not a good situation, right? Like, you don't want any hardware at all, whether you're talking your phone, your computer, or your PS5 getting hot enough to the point where that can even be a possibility of that happening. And then even going back to the Final Fantasy 16 example, having a game push the console so hard that it overheats it and causes the game to crash, if that's happening over and over again, you don't want that happening with your console. So at that time, a bunch of people were looking for coolers. I researched a bunch of them for a video, and that's how I got to this, the Scry Arctic cooler for the PlayStation 5. So of course we're going to unbox this thing, but I want to highlight how nice the packaging is real quick. It says Scry on the side, and on the back it gives you like a whole rundown of all the technical specs and everything like that, but it does mainly confirm the most important thing: you can use this vertically or horizontally with your PlayStation 5, and it's compatible with the stand that comes with your console, which is great. And I'm just gonna be real, I think I lost it. Like, when I had it vertically in my TV stand in California, it didn't fit with the stand on, and it was so snug that I didn't feel like it was gonna tip over. And it's like a 50-50 chance. I haven't gone upstairs and looked. It might be on my console, but I might have lost it. But if you still have yours, just you have peace of mind knowing that this thing will work with it horizontally or vertically, which is great. And as for the features, it's got 6 hyperfluid fans, as quiet as a library, super speed USB port, because this thing needs to plug into the back of your console. You do get a USB port on the actual hardware, which is cool. Flexible orientation, functional illumination, and it supports the standard and digital versions of the PlayStation 5. So if you have any PlayStation 5, this thing should work just fine. But yeah, let's slide it out of this packaging here. This sleeve is nice and tight, and then once you get inside here, once again, you have a picture of the cooler itself, and then you've got instructions inside of the box that says align top latch, connect the USB port, and clip the bottom latch. So this is the actual device. It's pretty solidly constructed. The fans look really good. You can see that they're LED light up ones, and that's the USB port that it's going to connect to on the back of the PlayStation 5. So that's kind of why I think it's going to work on both versions of the PS5, because the middle portion of the PS5 is the same. If it has a disk drive, it just juts out a little bit, where the disk disk drive it. I used to edit the mystery text for Austin, and like I know it's just a fan for the PS5, but when he would get ones in for mystery tech, I remember you'd take them out, and like the force of kind of having to pinch it to get it out of the packaging, that could be enough to snap the plastic sometimes. And this thing, it has no flex at all. This feels like an actual product, which is nice. So because I like to live life on the edge here, the game I decided to test this out with is Final Fantasy 16. I felt like that was the best option because that's the game that keeps your PS5 running as hot as possible, I guess. I'm just gonna be real, I keep my PS5 pretty clean. I have not had this overheating issue, so this is more of a peace of mind upgrade for me because we're still working on our living room here. I think eventually I am going to upgrade my TV cabinet, and I have this issue where I can't drill into my wall because it's like cement plaster, and I wanted to do the thing where you kind of have the HDMI cord go behind the wall and then out into the TV cabinet. That's just not really possible with where my TV is mounted, but there is a plug behind the TV, so I'm thinking of getting one of those PS5 wall mounts and just mounting my PS5 behind the TV so you don't see any cables. And if I do that, I really want to have a cooler like this attached to it, just because it's going to be in a really confined space, right? Like an 80-inch TV, just like a few inches from the wall, and then the PS5 back there. There's going to be a ton of heat generated, not only from the TV, but also the PlayStation 5, and it's just going to sit there. So I really want to have a cooler that's taking that hot air and just blasting it out the back of the PS5 and out of the back of the TV, and that's what this is going to provide me. But one thing I have to point out is that this thing actually works. Now, this is a single player game. It's fairly linear, so I can't test the exact same spots, but when you're playing the game, it's pretty much maxing out the PS5 at all times. And another reason I think this cooler is going to be worth it for a lot of people, specifically people who got a PS5 more recently, is Sony has done a ton of revisions on the PlayStation 5 over the past couple of years. So the launch PS5 internally is completely different from the PS5 you're getting now. And the one thing that they've reduced the most is the size of the heatsink. Now, it's been determined that maybe the heatsink and the giant fan that came with the launch PS5 was overkill, and I prefer that obviously because I ultimately want more cooling than I actually need because the console's not going to overheat and it's going to last longer. But with each revision of the PlayStation 5, they've cut down the size of that cooler more and more. So if you go and buy a PlayStation 5 right now today, the cooler is about half the size that it was at launch, the actual heatsink. So there's less copper, there's less heat traveling through it. So the newer PS5 you have, I feel like the more use you're going to get out of a cooler like this. And another thing that just kind of widens the gap once again is that this thing is dead silent. Now, on the PS3 and PS4, that really wouldn't matter because both of those consoles, when you started playing a game that was really pushing it, like on the PS3, I don't know, The Last of Us 1 would really push that console. And then when you're talking the PS4 or PS4 Pro, when you were playing that thing towards the end of the generation, it didn't matter what game you were throwing at it, whether it was The Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima, that would put on the fans and it would sound like a jet engine. But for someone like me who has a launch PS5 and lives in an extremely dusty environment, not because I don't keep my house clean, but because I have contractors in and out of here all the time, plastering drywall, sanding down the drywall, sanding down molding, sanding a ton of wood. There's dust and sawdust and like just gross stuff everywhere. My PS5 is still silent. I gotta give Sony credit too. It doesn't suck up a ton of dust. Like I took off my plates and just checked the fan because of all the dust flying around in here, and it looked like it was totally fine. So knowing that, I would be pretty upset if I popped a cooler on the back of my PlayStation 5 and it just made the thing even louder, because one of the best things about the PlayStation 5 is that for the most part, it's a completely silent console, even when you're playing crazy games like Final Fantasy 16. So I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. The box was not lying. This thing is as silent as a library when it is connected to your PlayStation 5. And that's kind of like the icing on the cake, which makes me feel good saying that there's really no downside to connecting this to your PlayStation 5. Like, just as a recap here, you're not losing a USB port by having it connected. You can use it vertically or horizontally. It looks nice on the back of your console, and because it's on the back, you're not even going to notice it's there. It's not going to like disrupt the look and feel of the PlayStation 5. It's going to suck the hot air out of your console instead of forcing cool air in, which is what every other cheap cooler out there does. It's easy to install and it works on both the digital and standard version of the PlayStation 5, and the price is not bad either. So as far as pricing goes, the MSRP of this thing is $59.90, but right now it's available for a special promotional price of $39.90 on the Scry website, and if you spend over $58 on their website, you'll get free shipping. You'll get that peace of mind knowing that your PS5 is going to stay nice and cool while you're playing all of these crazy next-gen games. Like Spider-Man 2 is right around the corner, and that one actually looks like it's pushing the SSD in the console pretty hard, and it was just announced that no matter what mode you're playing in, whether you're doing 30 FPS mode, 40 FPS mode, or 60 60 FPS mode, the ray tracing will always be active. And if you have a PC that's capable of ray tracing, you know that nothing heats that thing up faster than turning on ray tracing in games like Cyberpunk 2077 or even Spider-Man Remastered. Now, the default color of this thing is black, but Scry also has a really cool looking red spider edition, an Astro Blue edition, and a Cosmic Silver edition. So really, no matter what color of this thing you want, they've got you covered, and all of those different colors are affected by the special $39.90 promotional price, which again is awesome. And they're not done with the Scry Arctic, because they also have another cooler coming out called the Arctic S. So yeah, if you want to pick one of these up, the link is down in the description. And once again, huge shout out to Scry for sponsoring this video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.